share with you my care tips for growing really long, thick and luscious pothos. This kind of care guide obviously is kind of based around the care for this kind of vining plant like a pothos, but it's the same care guide that I kind of give to all of my vining plants. Obviously each one is quite different and will have tweaks here and there. So this one is mostly focusing on how to grow a big, long, luscious pothos. Okay, so a bit of background on this plant. I got this pothos back in December of 2020. It was your very standard kind of vining plant you buy in the shop. It had a little bit of a vine happening, but not all that much. And since then, I've been pretty consistent with giving it this kind of care, which has meant it's got this long and still stayed this bushy, and the leaves are still a decent size. They've not got really small like they do sometimes on vining plants. So to start off with, I am going to talk about the lighting. So always recommend giving this plant really bright but indirect sunlight. This is a Marble Queen Pothos, which if you've got say a golden pothos, you can get away with giving it a little bit of darker area, but you'll probably won't see the same results as big bushy luscious plants with decent sized leaves, and they won't grow as fast. So we are talking about the pure, like, optimum kind of care you can give it. So bright indirect light. This is a south facing room that this plant is in, and the sunlight never hits the plant, but the sunlight is coming in and bouncing off the floor, and this room is bright constantly all day. Okay, watering and fertilizing. So watering this plant, I let it dry out, not completely, but nearly. There have been occasions where I have, left this plant till the leaves get droopy. I wouldn't recommend that, but try and let it get fairly dry before you water it again. And I water this on every single watering, but it is a very diluted mix. It's probably half as much as it says on the bottle, but I do water it every single watering. In the winter, I do still fertilize this plant, but it's probably once every 2 weeks-ish. But I will constantly fertilize this plant because it is always growing, even in winter when it's dark and cold. This plant will still be pushing out leaf after leaf after leaf. And mostly, my top tip is cutting it back almost constantly. And it seems very like it does feel like you're going back on it, like you're making it shorter, which is obviously not what you want, but in the long run, I promise you, it will pay off. It will keep those leaves big, stop them getting really small like they do sometimes. As soon as I see the plant is getting smaller leaves, then I will chop it. Even if it's one leaf, just chop it off. I also do the same when you see that the internodal sections are getting further apart. So those bits are the area in between each node. Obviously, to get a fuller looking plant, you want them to be as close together as possible. And to get that to happen is to have brighter light, so it's not stretching out for the light. And also it does help if you do see it starting to get further apart and it's a bit like further apart than you'd want it, just chop it. This plant, honestly, they grow so fast that as soon as you chop it, it will be pushing out a new growth point almost straight away, especially in summer. It will just go. I've also experienced with this plant, cutting it back actually activates more nodes towards the top of the plant, which obviously it's pushing out 2 vines out of 1, so that's going to make the plant a lot bushier anyway. And off of propagating and chopping, I would also, if you have bought a plant that maybe doesn't have as many vines in there, you want as many vines in that pot as you can, ideally. That's how you will get a really bushy plant. Obviously, if you have a pot with one leaf in it, one cutting, that's only going to produce one vine. This has so many different vines, and there are more further up. I mean, that the more you have, the bushier your plant will be. So I always recommend that if you do chop it, propagate that and plant it back into the same pot, and the bottom will keep growing, and it will also just bush out the plant even more. So that honestly is one of the most crucial parts of making it really thick and bushy, is constantly chopping, propping, replanting. It really will feel like it's kind of like you shouldn't, because it's gonna make it take longer to grow and like you're making it shorter, but I promise you that is the one thing you really want to do. That is one thing that I would say is vital, is to chop. Make sure there's as many vines in your pot as possible. All of that will help. And last up, repotting. This plant I actually let get really root bound. They don't mind being root bound, and if anything, I've noticed better results sometimes when they're root bound. Obviously, it will get to a certain point where you will need to repot it because it will start declining, but it's about finding that right moment. You will see that if it does need repotting, it will tell you, because you'll start getting yellow leaves at the top and stuff like that. If you see that happening and it keeps happening, just take it out of the pot, see what the root system looks like, and if you think, okay, this really needs repotting, then repot it. If it doesn't look root bound, leave it, and it's probably another issue of why leaves are yellowing. Honestly, that is all of my tips. It's actually really simple. You have to be patient. It's not going to happen like that. This plant I've had for 2 years, and it's a really fast grower, which I'm really grateful for because it's made it happen quicker. But this was a goal that I had in mind, was to get it to the floor, which I have, and obviously now I have chopped it so that the internodal sections start getting smaller, and obviously I don't want it sitting on the floor and the aerial roots to root into the carpet. So I've chopped it back, and it's probably about a foot away from the floor now, which is fine. But this was definitely a goal, and if you really want this, you've got to be patient. It's not going to happen overnight. Obviously, if you get a plant that is fuller to begin with and is longer to begin with, obviously it will happen faster, but you don't need that. Even if you start this off just by cuttings, I've started so many plants off just by having a couple of single leaf cuttings in a pot and growing it like that, and it still works absolutely fine. It will take a bit longer because that plant needs to get more established because it's starting from cuttings, but it still works exactly the same. Okay, I think that is all for this little chat. Let me know if this was helpful in any way. Like if you did enjoy it, comment down below, and subscribe if you want to see more planting content from me. Thank you all so much, and I will see you in the next video. Bye guys.